It was the Jedi Master Yoda, or the puppet Yoda, depending on your point of view, that once said, "Always in motion is the future." Well, what you're looking at right here is the present. This is a futuristic car, conveyance, sedan that you can purchase now, but in so many ways it addresses the future because it is designed more than anything else to provide all the types of transportation needs you need out of your personal transportation, and at the same time embrace the future with modern technology and, most importantly, low emissions and extremely good fuel economy. And it compromises not on you personally as a driver in order to enjoy all these different features. But more than anything else, it's a very important vehicle for right now too. And I'll go into why right now. The Sonata. The Sonata is the mid-sized slash large, depending on whether or not you're reading literature from the manufacturer or literature from the Environmental Protection Agency. It is also considered to be a large car. But what it is a vanishing breed known as a sedan. This is not an SUV. It is a vehicle designed more than anything else to carry passengers very comfortably. Not tow big trailers. Matter of fact, this vehicle is not recommended to tow any trailers. But this 2024 Sonata Hybrid Limited is designed to get you from point A to point E as efficiently as possible without having to plug it in, ever. It is a hybrid electric with a gas engine and an electric motor that you never have to plug in. All you have to do is put gas in it like a regular car, except far less often than with most regular cars. Now this, of course, is the hybrid lifestyle, and this has been around in the United States pretty much since the year 2000 thanks to the Toyota Prius. And of course Toyota has expanded their hybrid line to all aspects of pretty much everything they sell. And Hyundai is doing the same thing with their vehicles, with their SUVs, with their cars. And this is one of the best. And this is also a fierce competitor with the Toyota Camry Hybrid. Matter of fact, they're so similar in so many ways. They have almost identical wheelbases of around 111 inches. They weigh roughly the same. They both weigh about 3,600 pounds. They both have 4-cylinder gas engines that are augmented with electric motors. And the electric motors are powered by lithium-ion batteries. Now, of course, with Toyota, all their hybrids used to be powered by nickel metal hydride batteries, but they've been going into the lithium-ion area, as everybody else, primarily because lithium-ion batteries are lighter, and they can put, for a given weight, they can put out more power than a nickel metal hydride. Although I'm still very fond of nickel metal hydride batteries because they've proven to be so incredibly reliable in hybrid vehicles, and they're just pretty bulletproof. Whereas lithium ions have been a little bit more persnickety. But that's what everybody's using now because all the numbers are great as far as the amount of weight and the amount of power it puts out. Now this particular vehicle has a 2-liter gas engine, gas direct injection, by the way, for those of you that are keeping score. But it is not turbocharged, the gas engine. No, it is a normally aspirated inline 4-cylinder of 2 liters of displacement, and then it's augmented by an electric motor of 39 kilowatts. And I'll get into more exactly what that means in total power output when we look at the engine. But as you can see, It is a nice long car, meaning that it has very good passenger accommodations. And even though it's a hybrid, meaning that it has a battery requirement that takes up some space, it still has a very roomy trunk. And if you'll take a gander at this, this is another one of these vehicles that can fool you because it looks like it doesn't have a trunk. It looks like it might have more of a hatchback. Au contraire, this is a regular sedan with a regular trunk and a pretty generous cargo capacity as well. Now, what else about this car is unique? Well, its main competitor, like I said, is the Toyota Camry Hybrid, and things get really interested in the transmission department because they use different types of transmissions. Now, on the Camry, you have a continuously variable unit, which works really, really well in hybrid applications because the transmission itself isn't a true continuously variable as much as it is a series of motors that drive the wheels. And it simulates, if you will, the operation of a 6-speed automatic transmission that you're familiar with, but it does that through a very, very different engineering approach. Whereas this car has, I believe, more of a conventional automatic transmission. It has 6 speeds, and it feels like a normal 6-speed, although it's really smooth. It's a very, very impressive drivetrain. But what else is really interesting, you have a manual mode where you can manually shift the car through those 6 speeds, but that's only in the sport mode, because if you put it in the eco mode, the paddles that you use to shift become regenerative braking paddles. You will see this in action later on. But all this stuff combines to make this a very attractive car. But as much as all these specifications and everything are impressive, what's really impressive is driving it, because they have put together one refined vehicle here. Every aspect of it has been massaged, carefully developed to really, really make it a very high quality vehicle. And to further augment everything we've been talking about, I think it's time to really concentrate on the drivetrain, which is under the hood, which we're going to open right now. Welcome, my friends, to Smart Stream technology. Well, that's what they call the engine. See, right there it says Smart Stream technology. One of the first things I noticed about this when I opened the bonnet here, is that it does not look at all like the Toyota hybrid system. It looks it just looks different. The placement of different components and stuff is different. Although you do have a situation where you have your air intakes to your gas engine right here in the front, and the exhaust manifolds in the back near the firewall, which is a very common way of doing it when you transversely mount your inline 4-cylinder engine. Now, the thing is, somebody was pointing out something the other day, basically that they were unaware of any car that ever had an inline 6 that was mounted transversely like this, and they're pretty much right. But the reason for that is, and the reason transversely is transversely, there's a direct commonality between an engine being mounted transversely and front wheel drive, because this way, when you have your 1, 2, 3, 4, you have your cylinders right here and your crankshaft turning this way, it's a direct link, if you will, direct drive system to your front wheels, because your wheels are on this side. If you have rear wheel drive, you have to have a drive shaft that goes from the engine back to the rear drivetrain, right? In order to do that, well, if you turn the engine this way, the crankshaft is going this way, and it's a direct drive into that drive shaft. So anyway, that's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons. A lot more of it has more to do with packaging, but as you can see, our gas array here is got a lot of wild stuff on it. Here's our robust looking air intake. We follow our air around to our air box here. There's where our filter is. Then it goes all the way around back here and down into here and into your intake system right there. That's the gasoline engine side. Now over here, electrics. They can be denoted by the fact, well, one of the things I like is this right here says motor. I think that goes the motor. That's just my belief. But this is where all the magic happens in terms of blending these two powertrains together. So what do our numbers look like? Well, our 2-liter gas direct injection Smart Stream technology engine puts out 150 horsepower at a peak of 6,000 RPM. Torque, 139 pounds of feet, also known as foot-pounds, of torque, which peaks at 5,000 RPM. Then over here to the electrics, we have a 39 kilowatt motor to the front wheels that translates over to 51 horsepower, and that peak is at from 1,800 RPM to 2,300 RPM. Now here's the fun part. The torque on the electric motor starts out at 0. Now I don't know if I think it should say it starts out at 1 RPM because it's at 0 RPM right now, and it's not putting out any horsepower. I can tell you that right now. But from 0 to 1,800 RPM is that torque peak, which is 151 pounds of feet, like I said. So what's our total output? Total output comes to 192 horsepower. And by comparison, the Camry puts out 208 horsepower. So it has a little bit more power to it. But we'll see. The big comparison here is going to be fuel economy, and I have a feeling they're going to be real close to about the same. But having already driven this Sonata Hybrid a bit, it's not lacking in power. It's not lacking in power in the least. It's got a very, very nice. I mean, what do you want to do? You want to race or you want to get to work? You know, you make up your mind. But believe me, 192 horsepower on a 3,600 pound car is perfectly acceptable, especially with the gearing involved and that wonderful transmission, that 6-speed transmission they've put on this thing. So something else I noticed that's interesting to me is it wasn't that long ago when Toyota started their dynamic force engine line, which is pretty much most of their small 4-cylinder engines now. In fact, could be all of them, uses 0W16 oil. Isn't that something? Well, so does the Hyundai. They also use the same kind of oil. So there's probably all kinds of similar technologies involved. Now, do we have any belts? Yes, we have a belt there. The Camry, last time I was looking at one, had no belts because all the hybrids with Toyota do not have any belts. But that's just your normal serpentine belt. Can't tell what all it's driving in there. Can you tell me? Well, it's a pretty conventional situation there, whereas Toyota relies a lot on smaller electric servos and motors. And when I mentioned the 016 oil, it's really fascinating on the dynamic force Toyota engines because there's all kinds of things that the oil pump and everything is also electric. And one of the key goals with any internal combustion engine these days, and it's been this way for quite some time, is to get the engine up to temperature as quickly as possible, because the worst emissions are dumped out of your engine when the engine is cold. So you want it to get up to temperature quickly so it can heat up the catalytic converters and everything else. And I would imagine with Toyota, they came up with all kinds of very interesting and innovative technology to make that happen as quickly as possible, just using oil flow. Well, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if this Hyundai engine doesn't have its own strategies like that, all aimed towards getting it up to temperature as quickly as possible. We all need that. You know, when you get up in the morning, you're tired, especially if it's like winter time or something, not like it is now, which it's summer, but you get up and you want to get up to temperature as quickly as possible so you can, get your coffee and sit in front of the computer and find out if the world's gone completely to kaputness. But anyway, I digress. But that is our drivetrain, and it is front-wheel drive only on this vehicle. I don't think, but I'm not sure. I'm relatively sure there is not a all-wheel drive variant available for this. I don't know if the Camry Hybrid has one either, to tell you the truth. But both of these vehicles, both of these manufacturers make SUVs that are hybrids that do have all-wheel drive. If you have a pressing need for that, like speaking of seasons, if you live somewhere that has this thing we used to call winter. Right enough? Right enough. So let's further expand on our technology here, and we'll go to places where you can see it from the outside and you'll know what it's doing based solely on the fact that it's just wheels. You know, there was a time when you'd see something as fancy as this, especially on something like a Hyundai, and you would find out it's just a steel wheel with a wheel cover on it because the design is so ornate. Well, this is a wheel, ladies and gentlemen. This is this is your Sonata hybrid wheel, and on the limited range, and it's beautiful. What's our tire size? 215/55 R17. So we got 17-inch wheels on here, which is fascinating to me. That's a real good general all-around size. Still my favorite size for for off-road capable SUVs. I really like 17-inch wheels because you got a lot of meat here, you see. Nice and thick. When you start going to those 20, 21, 22-inch wheels that so many manufacturers are so fond of these days, you lose a lot of that, and you hit a good enough pothole and you can damage the wheel. Much harder to damage the wheel on this beautiful Hyundai. And incidentally, what type of tire is that? It's a Solus TA31 Plus. I'm sure you're familiar with that, but you probably have a cap that says that. It comes from the Kumho rubber company, which is Korea, I believe, and they're good tires. This is, again, one of the things that's fun about the hybrid is they're trying to do everything for you. They want to give you an all-terrain, not an all-terrain, but an all-season type of tire. And this is M+S, mud plus snow rated, so that it should be appropriate for all-season use. Oops, I just hit the key by accident, sorry. But it's designed as much as, you know, for general travel, even if you get a little bit of winter precipitation on the road. But the fun part is these tires are also designed and specified by the manufacturer, and why they pick them is they also have a degree of low rolling resistance, because everything is poised towards efficiency here and trying to get the best mileage you can. So that's our Kumhos and our 17-inch wheels. I was very surprised by that they're 17s, because like I said, manufacturers are going crazy with these big wheels. Now, one thing I haven't talked about much is how beautifully styled this is, but this is just, you know, Hyundai has been so good with their design ethos in I'd say the last 10 years. They make some beautiful cars, and this one is fascinating, like I said, because if you look at your tail end, it really, I mean, my first reaction if I saw it, I would assume that's a hatchback, just because it kind of looks like a hatchback. But it still has what they call, this is what Hyundai calls a coupe design in a four-door sedan, because it does kind of have a coupe look to it. It also has a beautiful panoramic roof on it, so that enhances everything as far as it makes the interior feel even roomier than it already is, and it's already very roomy. So to prove my point that this is in fact a trunk, look at that, power assisted. Real hard to find the button, huh? Right there. This is a Hyundai strength. They do a lot of common sense stuff that I love, because it just makes the car make a lot of sense. As you can see inside here, we have plenty of room. I do not have the specification for the cubic feet because it wasn't with my specifications for some reason. It said to be determined or whatever. Let me tell you though, the Camry is 15 cubic feet, and I'm willing to bet this is at least that, because this is a beautifully roomy trunk area, and the battery situation does not seem to impinge on anything. What happens if this says pull? All right, I'll pull. Now, what I just did is I released the left side. You have your 60/40, so you have a full trunk through here if you want to carry larger, taller items. And with a lot of hybrid sedans, when they first came out, you wouldn't often have that option, because again, all this area right in here would usually be taken up by your batteries. But they've moved them, they've repackaged them, and that's another advantage to the lithium ion as opposed to the nickel metal hydride type of batteries, because it gives you the option of having a smaller battery that puts out the same amount of power, and therefore you can repackage things so you have things like, oh, I don't know, trunk space, you see. So what do we have under here? A tire mobility kit. I know that's what it is because it says that. But here is where I would put a spare tire, personally. But you have a lot of room here, actually. You could definitely get a temporary spare in here, I think. But this is, they've opted to do the mobility thing. I don't know if you have the option of getting a temporary spare tire back here, but you certainly have the room to do it, which is the most critical aspect of it. But all the stuff you need to mobilitate your flat tire is there, provided that your tire is not destroyed by a bad pothole. Less likely to happen thanks to the 17-inch wheels. I'm telling you, that's the way you want to go with these things. But again, you have your 60/40 trunk through, and you have a lot of trunk space. You could definitely get 3 passengers and yourself and all your luggage for a weekend getaway without any problem at all. Very roomy car. So there you have it. This is our introduction into our new 24 Sonata Hybrid Limited from your friends at Hyundai. And if you think it's impressive looking, and if you like the basic specs I just gave you, wait till you ride around in this thing, because this is a terrific car to drive. Here we are together in the harbingers of spring. So naturally, since this is a Hyundai, I have the joy of listening to sounds of nature while driving. Now, true, we also have a Bose sound system, and you can listen to your XM satellite or your FM or your AM or you can patch into your phone using a variety of methods. Ordinary Bluetooth or Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, all these things. But I like sounds of nature. So here is our instrument cluster on our Hyundai Sonata Hybrid. And right now it's I have it configured so that the instrument cluster will change very subtly depending on the drive mode. Now the default drive mode with this vehicle is Eco. And Eco is very interesting because it affects the way the car drives naturally, as far as it is more skewed towards fuel economy and tries to use the electric motor more than the gas engine, or that sort of thing. But it also, because I want to get right to this because I find this fascinating, we have our paddle shifters, right? Left side, minus, plus. But when you're in Eco mode, they're not paddle shifters. They are regenerative braking adjustment. So if you want to increase the amount of regenerative braking, what is that? That is, of course, when the electric motor swaps incredibly quickly from a motor to a generator. So instead of putting electricity out and driving the wheels, the inertia of the vehicle turns the motor and produces electricity through generation. So that's a real good way of doing two things: putting more juice back in your battery and decreasing the amount of load you put on your mechanical braking system, especially your brake pads. Your brake pads the more you can use regenerative braking, the longer your brake pads will last. It's a fantastic feature, and it's been around with hybrids since the very beginning, when Toyota first showed up with the Prius hybrid back in 1999/2000. So anyway, this is a real neat system because when you're in the Eco mode, you can adjust how much regenerative braking you have. And if you're on a really steep hill, well, you can crank it up. If you hit the minus sign, it's not going to do it now. Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. I'm going to put the car in drive. It should work while I'm in drive. Should work. Yep, there we go. Right down here, you will see the increase. It's on level 2, level 3, and then the plus paddle decreases the amount of regenerative braking, so we go down to 2 and 1 and 0. Neat, huh? Now, when we have a different mode, let's select a different mode, shall we? Sport, our cluster changes ever so slightly. with all this beautiful red stuff here. And these paddles are now available for you to use to do some manual shifting. Now this is a 6-speed automatic transmission, and there's second, third, fourth. It'll only go to second. Depending on what you're doing, it will limit the number of gears available to you, I think, because I was just driving it in that manual mode, in the sport mode, and even though it's a 6-speed transmission, the top gear I could get to was 5th. And I think if I was driving any faster, I could probably get into 6th, manually. And then it's very easy to downshift using the negative side paddle right here. It'll lower the gear, and the positive, it'll go back up again. So I've never seen that, and it may exist on other cars that I just haven't encountered yet, but where the paddle shifters actually do different things depending on your mode. And speaking of modes, we'll go into one more mode here. My Drive. My Drive lets you select from a couple of different settings. First of all, I just worked with this for a while. As near as I can tell, when you're in the My Drive mode, you have access to your regenerative braking, but not to the manual shifting. I could be wrong about that. I did a lot of research. I looked in the owner's manual. I drove it. That seemed to be what was going on, but I don't know. This thing's full of mystery. But let me show you what this actually means here with the vehicle. Drive modes. You select drive mode right there, and then this is My Drive. So if you hit that, these are your choices. When you're in My Drive, it can either pick any of the Eco, Sport, or Smart settings. Smart is not a separate setting in and of itself in the drive modes, but Smart just means it basically adapts depending on how it thinks you're driving the car. The only real adjustment you can make on this is the steering, which I find fascinating. You go to normal and you go sport. I have it set at sport right now. So when I'm in My Drive mode, it goes to the sport mode, and the steering is just a little bit tighter. You see. So that's what that is. So this is a 3-mode vehicle. It offers you those 3 modes for your pleasure. So what else do we have? Well, we have a central trip computer. Right now I have it set up to tell me my fuel mileage and distance since last it was refueled. And once again, this is a full hybrid. It's not a plug-in hybrid, so you never plug this vehicle in. You just put gas in it like a regular car, except you go much, much further. For example, I've already driven 124.7 miles since refueling, and according to the gas gauge right here, I still have 541 miles of range left. Take that, any of your electric vehicles. Ha! You never get range like that out of them electrics, never, unless you're going downhill the entire way, but in which case you don't need any kind of drivetrain. But I digress. But we have different settings here. We have, since our last reset, which the last time it was manually reset was 321.8 miles ago. Then we have our engine temperature, which is normal. And then we have our tire pressure. The vehicle needs to be rolling in order to determine that. Why is that? There's 2 kinds of tire pressure monitors, in case you're not aware of this. There's ones that directly measure the pressure of the tire, the air pressure in the tire, and transmit it to the CPU, which then ultimately ends up at your beck and call, so you can tell what the tire pressure is. Or it's a system that literally balances with each other what's going on in terms of tire rotation. It's the same sensors that you use with your anti-lock braking system. And if there is a particular wheel that's moving like a lot higher or lower in terms of speed of rotation than the other wheels, it'll pop up and tell you there's something wrong with that tire in terms of tire pressure. It's either lower or way high. So that's the older, simpler system, and that's what this car has, and it works fine. This is our mode telling us what's going on with our drive system. As you can see, we have a little engine here, and then we have electric motor here, and then we have our battery there. And that will tell you as you drive along, what's going on, where you're getting your power from. And with this car, because the drivetrain is look there, what happened? The engine just kicked on. engine, charging battery. Our lithium-ion battery back there. Anyway, what I was saying, this is such a nice, smooth drivetrain. When you're at speed like 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, when the engine kicks on, you can't always necessarily detect it because Hyundai has done a magnificent job at keeping that engine smooth. And it's not like it's undetectable, but it's not as detectable as a lot of other hybrids are. It's a really impressive job they've done with it. I admire it. Next we have, there's our current trip. Now then we have this here. We can go to our compass, and if we have our navigation route set, that'll pop up there. This will tell us if we are in fact using our adaptive cruise control, what setting we're on as far as the distance, and then we come back here to current trip. So those are pretty much everything available to you in your central trip computer right there in between your, as you may have noticed, over here we have in the, in the eco mode, we have our speedometer on the left side. On the right, it tells us whether we're charging the battery. We're in kind of an eco mode, but if we're in the power mode, that means we're getting heavily hard on that gas engine. We're putting the power out, which ultimately decreases your fuel economy. Now, if I change modes, what happens? I'm changing modes now. Hello? Oh, no, I'm pressing the wrong button. It would help if I press the right button. We go to sport, same thing. There is no tachometer in sport. And then we go to My Drive, same thing. So you're not going to get a tachometer if you want one. I'm sorry. There is no tachometer available for you. But you don't really need one. I mean, this car is not designed to be a race car. It's designed to be a very economical sedan, which it is. And with 192 total horsepower on tap, it gets along just fine. It accelerates in a sprightly manner. So there's nothing to be upset about there. Now, if you look up top, I will mention later, look at the reflection. The reflection in the windshield of this dashboard here, because of the light tan color, can be, under certain circumstances, extremely annoying. And I don't recommend, well, I don't know what our options are with this in terms of your color choices, but I think you'd be a lot better off if the entire dashboard here was black, because I found that reflection to be annoying at times and something that is to be avoided. But anyway, in here we have a heads-up display, and can I get to this quickly? Well, I can try. Screen layout, display, let's see if it's in here. No, it's not there. Hang on just one second. Cluster heads-up display, it even says so. Heads-up display, enabling, there. Can you see it? Ooh, look at there, it's flashing and everything. It's doing all kinds of stuff. Well, there we have our heads-up display, and here's my favorite mode, off. I don't like them. I'm just not. I'm not a heads-up display person. You may be, and if so, you will be very happy with this one. It works just fine. We'll go back here. Next, there's a lot of interesting things about this car, and one of the things I love about Hyundai, and they are still doing this, and they're still putting a real sense of logic and, oh, dare I say it, they're thinking about making the interaction of the human being with the machine as easy as possible, meaning that they're really keeping a lot of conventional controls around. But at the same time, they like to play whimsically with some other things. For example, here is our radio controls right here, and right here, here's your volume. And then if you're tuning, you can tune right over here. And then you have all your other media selections here. You got your Bluetooth, you got your XM, you got your everything else. But that's just nice and convenient because you just have knobs. Most of us grew up with having knobs to control things on the radio, on your car. And I still think it's, in many ways, is so much better than having everything depending on your touchscreen. So, so that's very conventional, right? And down here in your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning controls, it's also pretty straightforward. You have two different zones, the left and the right zone up front, so you can tailor the thermostat to whoever's sitting there, which is always a nice thing to do. It's very convenient for them. Or you can sync them, like I desync and I sync, so that the whole front end is like being cooled at the same rate. But anyway, it's very straightforward. You know, it has things like off. Very easy to understand. Now here's a fun one. This is the way they do their, the seats are both heated and ventilated. So if you go up this way, it will heat, and you go down this way, and it will ventilate. See, very straightforward, very easy. Now what is not exactly straightforward, but is not all that bad, is our shifter. You may notice there's no shifter down here. Nothing there, nothing there. What we have here is our shifter, and let's see how I can do this. There we are. That's a good shot. Isn't that a lovely shot? If you put it in drive, you twist up. Dink. It's now in drive. You want to go into reverse, you twist down. There you go. And you want to put it in park. Bink. And now we're in park. So it's very straightforward. It's different. It's not conventional, but at the same time, it's not crazy weird. And we got some crazy weird ones on certain cars out there right now. Genesis. Anyway, it's funny because I can kid Genesis because Hyundai is Genesis and Genesis is Hyundai. They're all part of the same family. I'll tell you one thing, boy, this ventilation on these seats works. I can really feel that. But moving down a little bit from all this wonderfulness and our shifter, here we have a USB-C and a USB-C with battery actuation, which I don't know what the hell that means. Then we have our QI. Now this QI is wonderful because you can just pop your phone. The way they've got this phone charger set up is brilliant because it's so, you just toss it in there. Boom, and now I'm charging. It works extremely well. I have no problem with it at all. And certain vehicles with having a case on your smartphone, it can be a pain to charge. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Toyota. But this works great, and you got all this room to, no matter how big, if you got one of them big old jumbo phones, it'll fit right in there, no problem. If you have QI capability, you're on your own, you're on your way, you're whatever. All right, so we don't have a shifter, but we do have our drive mode selector. That's how I've been doing that. Auto hold, which will hold the brakes on while you're sitting on a little hill and you hit the gas and off you go. It'll also, if you just put it into drive, the car won't move until you actually touch the accelerator, which is good. Here's a favorite. We have an excellent camera system on this car. Press button to display the camera view, or press and hold to activate the parking system. So there's our camera view, and as you can see, that's out the back right there, and then overhead our 360. But there's a little flicker in there. Huh, interesting. It's at a little bit different pace. Refresh than I thought it was. Here we can spin about. Look at that. Whew. Spin about, spin about. We are inspecting the area around the vehicle. I don't see any dogs out there. There I am. See, I'm right there. I'm hello. I'm waving. Oh, it's too dark inside here. But you can also adjust your back camera, and this is extremely useful, your front camera, if you're going down into untold territories that may not be paved, that may have big rocks in it and things like that. That is at your disposal. So an excellent camera system on this car, and that's easily accessed with that button. I was just in something else. God, what was it? I don't remember. But it had a very nice camera system. There were cameras all over the place, but it was so difficult to access. They did not have a dedicated button for your camera operation like this does right there. Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, what else? Look here. Here is our wonderful console, which, get that out of the way. Incidentally, I need to read this real quick. Comfort and convenience. We have a panoramic sunroof. We have what kind of leather trim seats? Thank you. That's what I was wondering, because these seats are very comfortable and they feel like leather, and sure enough, that's what they are. They don't have huge side bolsters like the sportier vehicles do, but it's good support. It's perfectly adequate for this vehicle, and this vehicle handles quite nicely. It's not a race car by any stretch of the imagination. It's not like a BMW M series, but it does fine for a sedan. It handles quite well, actually. And oh, I almost forgot. Here we got our a very roomy glove box. Could you put your tablet computer in there? Yep, you could. What is this? This is an interesting material. I have no idea. But as you can see, we have leather everywhere. We have leather here, and I wish this was black leather, as I mentioned before, but there you go. Now, what do we have up top here? Well, we have our guide to control our, I'm going to shut the shade here on our panorama. Nice, huh? And then I hit that, and we open her back up. Completely, look at that. It's actually very roomy. It's a pretty good sized sunroof on this thing. And you can do this. And there we are. So, that's pretty much our front end. The headroom is good, legroom is good. It's not super outstanding. You couldn't wear your 10-gallon cowboy hat up here, but it's very, very nicely done. In terms of the ergonomics are good. You have a belt line that is fairly high, but not too high so that you don't feel claustrophobic at all. And the driving position is great. So let's go back out into the outside. Oh no, you're here. Hi, pal. Boy, he's really behaving himself. That's unusual. Oh dear, I have it configured so that part of it's locked. Where is it? There we go. All right, as you can see, we're looking at about, not 90 degrees, but about 82 degrees. And we'll slide on back here, and lo and behold, lots of room. This is a very roomy back seat. And I have the front seat back a bit. And look at all this excellent leg, foot room situation. We have a drive shaft tunnel, which is weird because we don't have a rear drive shaft, but that's where a lot of our cablature runs, probably to our batteries. And it's about a third of the way as a massive one would be. In other words, some of these BMWs are about up here. So then Mercedes too. So that's not a, if you have 3 people in here, and you can get 3 people in here, this person will have to splay or not. They can actually put their feet on top of that and not be too excessively uncomfortable. You got 2 USB-Cs down there for your convenience. You got this nice little ventilation here. And look here, window shades. Nice, a nice feature. How far does our window go down? Not 100%, about 92%. I measure these things very accurately. You know, I have all kinds of instrumentation I use. Well, not really, but as you can see, this upholstery is much like the front in that it is perforated, and we don't have heating and cooling back here. But these are real nice seats, and the best part of it is you'd have good headroom and good legroom, so you can have fairly large passengers. For example, this looks pretty tight over here, right? This front seat is, I believe, all the way back right now. So, yes, if you do have a rear seat passenger, your front passenger is going to have to move up, scooch up just a little bit, but there's enough leg room that it'll be fine. It's not like some of these larger cars that have just ridiculous amounts of rear seat room, but it's good. It's what I would definitely say it's roomy enough for most families to have their in-laws back here comfortably. Armrest, fairly tall, but acceptable. Jaunty angle, cup holders. If you open the shade all the way, by the way, you get a lot more light in here, so any of your in-laws that are claustrophobic will not have a problem, but they got so much headroom anyway. I mean, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear the complaints. I don't want to hear them. But we have our 60/40 fold-down seats, as you may recall, so that you can, you got to ski through, or you can put all kinds of lengthier items in the trunk and reach them in here. When your in-laws are not sitting back here, unless you just don't like them and you want to just poke them in the back with things. Actually, One of the nicest features that ever happened, when I was growing up as a kid, there was no such thing as having a rear seat that you could fold forward to get into the trunk so you could put longer items. That just didn't exist. Now it's completely common in cars now. And I'm so glad, because that can really come in handy. And people keep, you know, SUV, 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 SUV. You have a lot of versatility in the modern sedan too for hauling stuff. You don't necessarily need an SUV. And if you get a sedan, it's going to get better mileage and probably cost you less. Worth thinking about. So anyway, thus we have our wonderful Sonata Hybrid interior. Very nice, very well made. The workmanship's quite good, and no ridiculous stuff on it. It's actually straightforward enough that it's very easy to interact with. Okay? Thank you for playing. Ah, yes. Come with me through the forest. You can see the forest here and here. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's going to happen every time I have a Hyundai or a Genesis. And I'm still waiting, and I'm sure I've missed it. I can't keep track of everything everybody's doing immediately when they're doing it in terms of automobile manufacturing, but I'm telling you, eventually we're going to see more and more and more of this. Look at all this construction. It's everywhere in America. Rebuilding all these roads that have been falling apart. We're going to see more manufacturers deciding to include sounds of nature. In my car, oh wow, look, can you see the deer? Can you see them? There they go. I hope you can see that. That's a young one. I would say that is an adolescent. An adolescent. Hello, little deer. Boy, I tell you, they keep adding layer after layer after layer on this road. So pretty soon I'm going to be driving along here, and it's going to be up by the top of these telephone poles here. It's pretty amazing. Ah, the wildness of the construction world. But anyway, it's one of my favorite features of Hyundais. And you tie in this very nice hybrid power plant, which there's two things about Hyundai and this hybrid system that is so good. And the number one thing, and this goes across with all their four-cylinder engines, they've come up with really good, innovative engineering solutions to really quelling vibration from the four-cylinder engine. So it's a much smoother engine than a lot of the competition, even the competition that sells a lot more of their vehicles than Hyundai sells of theirs. But Hyundai has done such a good job with this, and it's funny, we're on a very smooth piece of road here, as you can see, because it's just been repaved. You know what's really weird about this? I'll tell you what's really weird about this. So I'm stopping because of all the construction. My God, I don't know how I'm gonna get out of here. Just as long as you know I'm here. Everything is as conducive as possible right now on this road to demonstrating how smooth and quiet the car can actually be, because we got brand new pavement underneath us. It's not even been striped. You know what's really weird is they put down the first layer and then they striped it, and the striping lasted for maybe 2 or 3 days, and then they paved over it with another layer. So I don't understand why we had all that stuff, all those stripes on there. Didn't really need them, but isn't it nice sitting here waiting for our construction? Don't worry, I'm not going to put you through this. I'm going to use the powers that I have to dramatically increase the passage of time. Are you ready? Hang on. There we go. We have been freed from the bonds of construction. So I don't know why I'm not hearing my, what's wrong with you? Why don't I hear anything? Is this off? What the? I'm telling you, this is something that we all suffer with. There we go. All right, now we are back on the road. We have dispelled with the construction. Dispelled? What's the word I'm looking for? Dispatched the construction. How about that? That works. Works for me. All right. We are now cruising, and then we are now steering. One of the things I've mentioned about this, because Hyundai and Kia and Genesis, they are all part of the same group. They've done a very good job with their lane tracing and this kind of thing. Compared to a lot of the competition, they seem to have it dialed in better. It seems to be that it doesn't over-control the car as much. The inputs that it, excuse me, that it does to the steering are they're very, what is the word? They're more appropriate, I think, than a lot of the competition. A lot of the competition tends to oversteer and tends to make all kinds of mischief when you're driving along, and this seems much more. I'm trying to get a new Honda product, because Hondas were, when they initially started with their self-steering driver augmentation systems, they were not good at all. As far as they tended to weave back and forth, but Hyundai has always been really good at this. And here's a tough one right here, because we're going from 2 lanes to 1 lane, and it's looking, it's searching, but it's figured it out. It didn't panic, it didn't instantly just cut everything off, and now I can see the stripes, and it's doing a very good job. Now, what is the purpose of these self-steering things? Well, great question. I think you should steer the car when you're driving it. You know, that's me. But there's times when you're going to be doing something with your hands, like say you're traveling on a trip and you're going to have your hamburger while you're driving. Who among us has not done this? And this way, while you're unfolding the foil off of your burger to get to the delicious goodness within, you can. It's kind of hard to drive. You steer with your legs. You do all kinds of things. We've all been there, right? Well, if you have a car that has a good, decent self-steering system, you can take moments like that and have the car steer itself, and you can do much faster and efficiency unwrap that burger and get to it. You see what I'm saying? To me, that's my #1 favorite thing about, and actually my only thing that I like about self-steering, is you have that ability. You have the what you can actually make things a little bit safer, and you only want to do that obviously on a big highway. Now, this kind of a road, this is starting to push it a little bit, because what the systems are really designed for more than anything else is for just flat, long interstate highway situations. That's where they work their best. And this is why you have the new Super Cruise and Blue Cruise and Won't You Take Me on a Sea Cruise systems and things like that will actually follow traffic. And if you come up, you have your adaptive cruise control set, and you come up on a slower moving vehicle in a 4-lane car situation, the left lane is clear, the car will actually turn on the turn signal, change lanes, pass the car, and then take you back over to the right. It's pretty amazing. But that is only in situations where it's wide open spaces, and why you need that. Again, with every advancement of technology where the car is doing more for you, there's more opportunity for you to A, be distracted, and B, fall asleep. So they have all these other systems in the car that are watching your head and trying to determine whether or not, and what happens if I can make this light come on real easily if I just do this, like I'm looking at a fire or something like that over there. car's not doing it now, but it did earlier when I was looking at something I was past, was saying, hey, maybe it's time for a break. So we have all these clashing technologies, and I mention that because no matter what kind of car you're driving, a full electric, a hybrid, a full gas, doesn't matter. All these systems are more and more becoming standard issue on new vehicles. And you need to be aware of what they can and can't do. That's why it's a silly thing to say, but it's really true, and it's always been true. You really ought to, if you buy a new car, sit down and read the owner's manual start to finish. And what you're going to find with newer cars is it's going to take you a lot longer to read through it, and a lot of it is not going to make sense to you until you actually get in the car with the owner's manual and figure it out, because cars are getting in the ever-increasing desire to take the driver out of the picture. They're making cars more and more and more complicated, and you have to learn what your car can and can't do. See, right now, this is a real test for the self-steering, because, and it's using all kinds. Oh, look at, see what just happened? It was a little much for it, and I'm gonna turn it off now because it was starting to go askew. But that's, like I said, that circumstances where we had a fairly tight road at a fairly low speed. That's not what the self-driving is for. That's not really what it's designed to do. It will be eventually, and obviously with all these people that want to put fully automated cars on the road, which is such a bad idea. You're going to see more and more of this situation where they're not going to be able to respond very well. And another thing they do with a lot of these automated systems is they slam the brakes on when they don't need to. And they're doing that purely for safety reasons, but you can cause an accident by doing that too. If someone behind you is distracted. Anyway, the drivetrain on this Hyundai Hybrid, this Sonata Limited, excuse me, is really impressive because it's very smooth and it gives you all the benefits that a hybrid gives you. And I think still, for our driving situation nowadays, it is the ultimate choice for everybody, because it's not a situation where it doesn't do two things. It reduces the amount of fuel you use, therefore reducing emissions, and it has extended range, and you still have the ability to drive all day if you need to without having to stop and charge the car. Find a charger and charge. You'll have to refuel the car, yeah, but that's usually not an issue. You can usually find a gas station pretty easily. And for this time, again, if you have a lifestyle that suits the ownership of an fully electric car, good for you, enjoy it. But most of us don't. The system that we have in the country right now, even though they're trying to dramatically increase the charging stations, but still, you have to sit at a charging station for a little while. Now, a vehicle like this, this is a direct competitor. I think the perfect vehicle to compare together, and because I don't have as much experience as I should have with the new Honda Accord, because I haven't been able to get one, the Accord Hybrid, but the Toyota Camry Hybrid. Both of these vehicles, as I believe I've mentioned before, almost identical wheelbase, almost identical power output. The Camry's got a little bit more power. Almost identical weight. They are neck and neck competitors with each other. And I have great things to say about both these vehicles. Honestly, I think if you need a sedan, you can't really. There's other choices out there that are good, sure, but these are really good cars. And another thing, I don't know as much about the Sonata, but I know in the case of the Camry, they've been very, very reliable vehicles. They've even been used as cabs in New York City and places like that, extensively actually, even though Toyota does not make a cab fleet version of that car. They're literally buying these cars and painting them yellow. And at least that's my understanding, unless something's changed. but they're just very, very bulletproof. And is the Sonata as bulletproof? I don't know. I really can't tell you because I just have no information. I have no data on that. But I will tell you one interesting difference between the Camry Hybrid and this hybrid is the transmissions are different. This one has we're in full electric right now, which is nice. This vehicle has a 6-speed automatic transmission, or so it says. Now, is it a true 6-speed, or is it a modified continuously variable transmission that has detents in it that simulate a 6-speed automatic? I don't know, but from your operational standpoint, and you as an owner, you have a 6-speed automatic. What does that mean? Well, you have a couple of interesting choices here. If you put it in the eco mode, then these paddles become regenerative braking paddles, meaning that you can use it to slow the car down in lieu of the mechanical brake systems. Using the hybrid, using the electric motor will swap around as a generator, and you can put charge back in your hybrid battery. The degree at which that is done is up to you, increase it or decrease it. That's when the car is in eco mode. Right now, that's the mode we are in. But however, if I was to move this into sport mode, which I have just done, these paddles now become shifters. So I can knock it down to 5th gear just like I just did, 4th gear, back up to 5th, back up to 6th. Do you see? So the paddles have a different function depending on the drive mode, which I find absolutely fascinating. Now we're going to go back to my eco. There we go. And now regenerative braking again. That is really interesting, and that is something I have not encountered before. Does anybody else do that? I don't know. I know the last hybrids that I've driven that were Toyotas had a manual paddle mode. That was just, it was there pretty much all the time. It didn't have an adjustable regenerative function. And you could argue that that's not that important, being able to set the brake regeneration yourself, but it's a nice feature to have. I mean, it's cool. It's cool. It's what I'm talking about. Wow, here we have our rear suspension on our Sonata Hybrid. And one of the first things I noticed is we have, of course, a multi-link situation with the lower control arm there with the coil spring, which is located here, sits right in this cup right here. Very common practice. You also, of course, have a unibody construction with a subframe, and there's your subframe there that bolts to the unibody, and then it functions as a cradle to hold the suspension and somewhat isolate it from the rest of the body to further smooth the ride, in addition to what the suspension itself is doing. Now, anyway, one of the first things I noticed was our coil spring is here, and here's our shock absorber mounted outboard, way outboard. You'll see that front shock absorber placement on rear suspensions to be all over the map. A lot of times, even sometimes, but rarely these days, mounted all the way forward. This is a pretty common mix-up, but it's further outboard than I'm used to seeing, which I find very interesting because it matters. All this stuff matters in terms of your overall ride quality and your handling. And engineers experiment when they're starting from scratch to design a rear suspension or a front suspension for that matter. And they move stuff around quite a bit to see what works best in this particular application. And then all this goes into computers and over time, so the turnaround time when they do a redesign on something is so much faster because they have all this data from all the other vehicles they've built that they apply to this. So what you're seeing is a suspension that's probably very similar. I can't off the top of my head remember exactly what the Santa Fe, well, not the Santa Fe, that's a bad example since they just changed it, but like the Tucson, and vehicles of roughly this size that have a fully independent suspension, unibody with subframes, all that stuff mounted together, and see if they're appreciably different than the sedan we're looking at right now. Hell, I don't know. But one thing I can tell you, the rear differential for your rear drive system is invisible. It goes there and you can't even see the drive shaft. That's because there is none. It's a front wheel drive car. I think that's the main reason. But over here we have our, that little puck right there is part of your parking or your emergency brake system, however you want to refer to that. And there's some aluminum in your brake structure, the structure of the brake, you see. But like I say, very far outboard here is your shock absorber. Now, the further we look under here, we see a lot of interesting things. There's a lot of cladding, which is, there we go. A lot of cladding underneath there, and on this side, and on this side, to further streamline the undercarriage. Now, there's numerous reasons for doing that. And by the way, look at how beautifully flat all this is. Your exhaust pipe comes to here and then goes all the way over here and says hello to this side, and then comes back and says, no, I don't like that side very much, and comes back towards the middle and back out. But look at how wonderfully flat it is. It's all designed to further the airflow, which does a lot of things for you. One of the main things it does is it helps with your fuel economy, but it also keeps the cabin quieter in terms of road noise. And as you can see, this car is not a off-road vehicle by any stretch of the imagination, but it does have a fair amount of ground clearance. So you're not going to be scraping it all over the place if you are driving around on unimproved roads, unimproved driveways, and you yourself are unimproved. So there you go. But it's not, everything is very nicely tucked away, and you can see right there we have one of our electrical cables. So the battery pack itself, I'm assuming, is up in here, towards the end there. And those cables run all the way from up to the electric motor. And that is, of course, a lithium-ion battery pack. And we do not have, back here, we do not have a spare tire. We have, this is your lower part where a spare tire, in theory, could be placed. But this has a tire mobility kit instead, which I frown upon, but there you go. That's, again, a measure. A lot of people think it's to save cost, but I think more importantly it's to save weight. That's why they don't, more and more cars are going to just motility kits rather than actually having a spare, which I think is a big mistake if you live in the real world. But, you know, if you live in an urban environment where the auto club can come pick you up, and you have some kind of roadside assistance situation, but I mean, what they're ultimately going to have to do is tow you in. If your tire is trashed and you can't fix it with the motility kit, you're going to have to be towed in and swap out and get your tire completely replaced. So that's just the way of things. But anyway, this is, pardon me, this is, and by the way, all metal, very little aluminum except for, like I said, with this brake component over here. This is all your steel structure. Probably they would call it high strength steel, and which begs the question that I'm asking for is, when do we get low strength steel? That's what I wanted. Flimsy, I think they would call it. As you can see, compressed, extended. This car has pretty good travel in the rear suspension. Half of the cars that I put on this exact spot to share with you their rear suspensions, this outboard, this extended tire is just barely touching. But on this particular vehicle, it's surely affixed to the road surface, in this case, an unimproved road surface. So that's something else I really like, because that aids overall stability. If you're going through a really bumpy corner, it's great to have all that suspension travel. Okay? Thus, we have now experienced our Hyundai Sonata Hybrid limited rear suspension. Well then, our 2024 Sonata Hybrid Limited has a base price of $37,200. I don't know the final pricing because I didn't even have the base price on this Maroni, but that's a bargain for a very, very well equipped hybrid sedan that gets, in my travels, an average of 44.7 miles per gallon. That's pretty good. and a worthy competitor to the Toyota Camry Hybrid. So, which is right for you? You gotta buy, I always say this, but I really mean it, you gotta try to drive them both, because they're both excellent cars, especially given the mileage they get, and they're both pleasant drivers too. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.
Whatever the tube tells you, you dress like the tube, you eat like the tube, you raise your children like the tube, you even think like the tube. This is mass madness, you maniacs. In God's name, you people are the real thing. We are the illusion.